20% of people who are retired regret the decision to retire.
There's so many other aspects of retirement that I think people don't factor in.
The social and emotional regrets that people have.
Think about how you're going to sustain relationships and who those relationships will be with.
I think you also have to have a clear plan about what's next.
You've done all these activities that start to feel like the same thing every day. Now you have to figure out what's next. What do you want to do with your life? Where do your interests lie? What fulfills you?
Don't retire, rewire. Welcome to Wealth Strategies Unleashed with Concenture Wealth Management. I'm Robert Gilliland and
Karen Hyder.
Hey, thank you all for joining us again this week. Karen, a lot of things going on, but as always, when we have you on the podcast, we have to start with the same thing. Go ahead and give me the dad joke.
The Karen's Corner of the moment, the favorite dad joke of the week.
Oh, I see what you did there. A little bit of Karen's Corner. Nice.
Yes. All right, here we go. How is a wallet like an onion?
I have no idea.
Every time I open it, I cry.
You're a wealth manager. You're supposed to be better than that. So that was pretty good.
Thank you.
Pretty good.
Thank you.
One of the things that I think that today we kind of walked through and kind of talked about is in 2023, Nationwide did a survey, and in their survey they found that 20% of people who are retirees, regret the decision to retire.
Wow. That's a huge number. You know, that's so interesting. I feel like everybody that is getting ready to retire thinks about the financials. How many people do we sit down and plan for and talk about money? There's so many other aspects of retirement that I think people just don't factor in when they're planning and preparing for retirement.
Yeah, I think that you're right. And a lot of times when we sit down with people, one of the very first things we say to them is, after 6 months and every day being a Saturday, we've said it before on the show. What are you going to do? What are you going to use to fill your life? So let's kind of break some of these down.
Yep.
You got the social and emotional regrets that people have.
Mm-hmm. I think when I think of social, the first thing I think of is friendships and connections with other people. I think so many people go into retirement thinking, I have all these plans I'm going to do, and they forget to factor in the connections that they've made in their work life that have kept them, for lack of a better word, feeling connected to other people. So not taking the time before you retire to think about how you're going to sustain relationships and who those relationships will be with can feel so lonely and impactful once you hit that button and go to retire.
You know, and 45% of people who work in retirement don't do it for financial reasons. Mm-hmm. They do it for those social connections. And, you know, you go to think about those social connections, you know, whether it's having coffee every Wednesday with the boys or that golf group or Mahjong group or Bunko, those different groups right there. But it's also a great time as you're thinking about retirement to think about how do you go through to strengthen those family bonds.
Yep.
Right? And there's a lot of big opportunities kind of inside of there. And I think also you kind of take that a step further. It's about that social connection, but I think you also have to have a clear plan about what's next.
Well, exactly. You have to know what you're retiring into, I feel like is a good phrase to describe it. So going past what we've talked about with the after every day is a Saturday and you're 6 months into retirement, you've played all the golf every single Saturday, you've done all these activities that start to feel like the same thing every day. Now you have to figure out what's next. I think when you first retire or prior to retirement is a great time to think about what do you want to do with your life? Where do your interests lie? Do you have a passion for helping other people? Is there a volunteer group that you want to spend your time with and you want to get heavily involved and into? Are you passionate about a certain group that you want to dig into? I think it's a great chance, and this ties back to our connections topic, but it's a great chance to figure out what fulfills you, what gives you that fire and that drive to get up every day and feel like you have a purpose in life, and also allows you to create new connections with people and maintain relationships.
You know, I tell people, and you've heard me say this before, is that, and I did this with my father, which was very, very difficult because he had a baseball card shop up in Dallas, and he sold it, and he's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Now, he didn't follow my advice, but I told him to sit down and make a list of every single thing you would like to do if you weren't messing around with baseball cards.
Oh, that's smart.
You make that list out, and then you can go through. And I really think that people should start that 5, 10 years prior, right? What are you going to do? Give yourself something to do, whether it's going to be, which I know we're going to talk about travel and things like that, but there's tons of opportunities to really live your very best life. There was a book called Don't Retire, Rewire. And it was all about, if money wasn't an issue, what would you be doing with your time? And really, I think that when you go to look and view retirement, that's your opportunity. But you have to plan. We can take care of the finances.
Yep.
But you have to figure those things out that are going to fill your time.
Well, and nowadays with social media, I think it's so much easier than ever before to use the power of social media to find what you're interested in. So whether you're in a big city or a small town, jump on Facebook, Instagram, something, and find groups that interest you and jump right in. And I think you're right. Doing that 5 to 10 years before you retire takes the pressure off of having to get into these groups at retirement. And when you're itching to find new friends and do things, if you're already integrated into these groups and passionate and heavily involved, it makes it that much easier to transition into those groups and spend more time with them as your time frees up in retirement.
That's exactly right. You know, let's switch a little bit and let's talk a little bit about lifestyle. What are some regrets people have around lifestyle?
I think a big one we hear often is around travel and activity. How many times do we talk to people that have big dreams of wanting to travel, want to go do these big trips, and then a couple years down the road, a big health scare happens or some kind of medical event happens that limits their ability to travel? I think too often people spend their working years doing all the things financially that we tell them to. They're saving, they're accomplishing goals along the way, making sure they're prepared for retirement. But then they get to retirement and they finally have the time, but maybe don't have the health that allows them to do those things. So I would say one big regret is not finding the right balance of being able to do the activity and the travel that you want to while your best years and your best health is there, so that you can continue doing those in retirement, but there's not the extreme stress of trying to do all the trips you'd envisioned before a health event or before something happens where you're no longer able to.
You know, it's kind of interesting. I kind of think about a story with one of our clients that we just recently met with. Their goal was to set foot on all 7 continents. And they finally hit the last one, Antarctica. And you could just tell there was a lot of pride in that. First of all, not many people have touched all 7 continents.
Yep.
There was a ton of pride in being able to do that. And that's now what they get to do is they get to go back to those different places that they really enjoyed and really go and absorb it. So the fact that they walked through and they did those while they were healthy, young, walking, traveling, going from here to Australia is not an easy trek, right? But to be able to go and do that and really get engaged. That is so vitally important, understanding and knowing about that travel. We've got other clients that one of their goals is to take a picture of all 50 state capitals. I mean, as you go through and click, it's something that goes through to keep them kind of going.
Absolutely.
You know, the next thing that we bump into is that people who at or near retirement upgraded their home and they ended up regretting that. What kind of thoughts do you have around that?
Yeah, I think the people that we've talked to that end up having the biggest regrets around that have talked about how much it limits their ability to go do other things. So the people that have upgraded, where we've heard stories of people not appreciating that decision, is so they go and upgrade, spend all this money, and now they've got a new mortgage. Even if they pay it outright, they now have these added expenses of a larger home, and they no longer have the free cash flow and the ability to just jump in the RV and travel for 3 months at a time, or find an Airbnb on the other side of the country and spend 6 months there. It limits their ability to travel and do all these other things. So I think we often run up against people that regret these decisions for the lack of mobility and flexibility.
Yeah, and it ends up being that they have the yard work or they have this maintenance, and then there's also the proper. Just because your house is paid off doesn't mean that you're living there for free.
Exactly.
Right. and so we have seen people that and the same is true as if they end up downsizing. Now that can be good when it comes to cash flow, ease of maintenance, those types of things. But making sure the other thing that we've had is that people have have said, well, I want to move to this state or this location, and not exactly been comfortable with where that was, and then ended up sold their house, let's call it here in Houston, and moved to, call it Denver, Colorado, and then realized, hey, look, I don't want to live in Denver anymore. The winters are too cold. And now they have to come back and they have to rebuy, and a lot of things have changed. And so
and I'm going to add to that one too. We've also had clients who we've met with that go to retire and say, we're in our forever home. This is our favorite place to be. We're absolutely going to be here. And 5 years down the road decide, you know what, there's this wonderful community down the street that's for 55 and up. It's where all our friends and people our age are, with all these great amenities. So I would say it's location. It's also upsizing or upgrading and downsizing. But then it's also just taking the time to have a thorough and deep conversation, whether it's just you or you and your spouse, about what you really want. Maybe exploring options you never thought you would ever be into, such as a 55 and up community that has these amenities and things important to you. So just really taking the time to think through all options that you may not have thought through before.
Anytime someone says, this is my forever home, I always tell them, well, you're about to learn how short forever really is. Because inevitably that's what happens.
No doubt.
What about regrets about relationships and financials?
Yeah, I think they're quite often, when we meet with spouses, they are so heavily focused on, can we retire? Are our finances appropriate? And will we be able to successfully, securely retire? And they haven't thought through the together piece of it. So what I mean by that is maybe one spouse has big dreams of, okay, I'm no longer working. I want to travel to the other side of the world, to this continent, and go to these different countries. While the other spouse says, you know what, I did all the traveling while I was working. I'm done. I want to remain here in this state and maybe a couple neighboring states, but that's my goal. So not having conversations with your spouse about what retirement looks like and what each of you need to do and have to feel fulfilled.
Well, it's so funny. I can tell you two stories that I think that this one is really, really, really important. One of them was sitting down, and when our clients hear this, they're going to know exactly who I'm talking about. They were sitting down, and he was like, I'm going to retire. And she's like, well, I think you've got a lot more in you, just because it kept him going at that time. And she finally looked at him and said, you will never call and ask me what's for lunch. And you will never call and ask me what time am I going to be home.
Yep.
Because she was used to having her responsibilities and what she did, and she had that handled, and now didn't want to have the other side of that. And so I kind of think through that. The other one is that this is my father-in-law. When he retired, he got really kind of engaged in how the house was managed. Well, it had operated for 40 years just fine
without his input.
And it got so bad at the time that he told her, you really should organize the pantry like this and turn all the labels like this. That's when she decided his job was going to be to go to the grocery store. So his job was to go to the grocery store, but she always left at least one thing off of the list. Because if it ever came to a time that he was getting in her business, hey, I need you to go to the grocery store and pick up some more paper towels. She had tons and tons and tons of paper towels, but he was every other week going for more paper towels.
That is smart.
But I think that it's all too often one spouse handles the finances and the other spouse handles the bill paying, or one spouse handles the all things financial and the other spouse handles all things operational, if you think of it from business, right? You come together and you're together all the time because of retirement, and there's things to do. You have to be real clear on how that communication goes.
Absolutely.
Because if someone says, well, hey, look, like what you said, I want to travel all the time, but the other spouse doesn't, well, that creates that friction. Look, these are supposed to be the best years of your life, right? And so
even down to, I think we've heard from some clients, just daily schedules. Maybe one spouse likes to sleep in and is used to doing that, and the other spouse is an early riser. Getting used to being around your partner at all times and merging those schedules that have been different for maybe 40 years. I think retirement can be challenging for spouses at first without having those conversations ahead of time of what to expect, what are the kind of no-go type things that we can't do with each other. Like you said, the communication ahead of time of what to expect, what we allow, and what we can do to make sure that we're both in a good place.
Yeah. So, Hey, I think we covered a lot right here. If we were to go through and rehash the 5 things, the 5 biggest retirement regrets, they are not maintaining those social and social connections.
Yep. 2, not having a clear plan for what's next.
Not traveling while you're healthy. Get out of town.
Yep. What to do with our home.
That's right. Do we upgrade? Do we downgrade? What happens inside of there? And then the 5th one is making sure both spouses understand what retirement is going to be.
Yep.
One spouse may want to spend all the time with the grandkids. The other one wants to spend all the time out of town.
Absolutely.
And that could be a big difference. Well, thank you. I think this was helpful, and hopefully this was helpful to everyone. And thank you for tuning in to this podcast, and we will see y'all next week.
See you next time.
The information contained herein is intended to be used for educational purposes only and is not exhaustive. Diversification and/or any strategy that may be discussed does not guarantee against investable losses, but are intended to help manage risk and return. If applicable, historical discussions and/or opinions are not predictive of future events. The content is presented in good faith and has been drawn from sources believable to be reliable. The content is not intended to be legal, tax, or financial advice. Please consult a legal, tax, or financial professional for information specific to your individual situation.
This work is powered by Concenture Wealth Management, registered representative of Sanctuary Securities, Inc., an investment advisor of Sanctuary Advisors, LLC. Securities offered through Sanctuary Securities, Inc., member FINRA, SIPC. Advisor services offered through Sanctuary Advisors, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. Concenture Wealth Management is a DBA of Sanctuary Securities, Inc. and Sanctuary Advisors, LLC.